Hello friends of the channel, I am Martin, MJ Hobby Corner. Before I begin this video, I would sincerely want to thank everyone who posted and for all the kind and supporting comments during the difficult news of the passing of my mom. So, thank you again. And now, let's go to the topic of this video. So what I would like to do in this part, and this is going to be a series of videos, a short series, not more than three videos. I think not more than three. Basically, what we want to do is show you guys how the map portion of our future campaign in Fantastic Battles is going to work. Now, I've had to include some house rules to the campaign system because we are adding a naval component, and the naval component will work with the rules Galleys and Galleons by the same author. Nick Wright wrote those rules as well as Fantastic Battles. So yeah, so basically this video will just show how the campaign system works and any house rules that we have, how that's going to work. And diplomacy is going to be the critical one. That's the one we really basically added the house rules to. I've reworked how the diplomacy phase works because it's only Julie and I playing. And the way the original diplomacy rules work, it's a lot simpler, but it would work best with a lot of players, okay? So if we had a lot of players, we would keep the diplomacy rules as they are in the game. However, sometime I may want to play solo, or because I'm only working with Julie, the diplomacy rules will come in effect, and these are all house rules. We'll discuss those in the next video. This video is going to talk about naval component, how navies will move on the map, and how terrestrial forces will move, and how battle is initiated. So let's go to the tabletop. Let me show some of the pieces that we will be using in the campaign. So this strange skyscraper building, painted purple, with the banner of the Dark Elves, represents one of the AI factions that we can do diplomacy with. These only exist for the diplomacy part of the campaign. Okay, next is optional, but these represent our diplomats. These markers will simply be moved along the table to one of these faction cities and where they will conduct diplomacy. Okay, so Julie chose this diplomat and I chose this one. So those are just optional ways of recording that event. We have coins from an old pirate game. These coins, each coin will represent 50 gold. They're only for keeping track of things, really. They don't have any real function mechanically in the game other than just reminding us, okay, I have 200 gold. We just count each of these as 50. These little banners, and this one simply identifies a port city. It is attached to a peg, which can then be attached to this building. It goes right through the roof. I made holes in the roofs, and that will turn this building into a port city, which can be built along the coast of any region that we own, of any friendly region. We have little explosion markers to tell us that there is a battle currently going on between two markers. And that battle is always resolved. Well, not always. Some battles are not. But most battles are resolved on the tabletop as a miniature war game using either the rules of Fantastic Battles for terrestrial combat or Galleys and Galleons for naval combat. This represents my capital city, and it has the words cap on it. which I am the blue one. That is my capital city. And red is Julie's capital city. She is the red empire. I am the blue empire. And these represent settlements without the banner. They're simple settlements that can be built on a region that you control, on a friendly region, and they allow you to actually generate a garrison army that does not move. It does not play a role in any tabletop battle. All it does is it gives the opponent a -1 to their subduing roll. And those armies we're going to see in just a little minute. It's a little flag that we place on the settlement to represent the fact that there is an army garrisoned here protecting it. You pay 100 points for that army, or 100 gold. And that means that if your opponent tries to subdue this territory, they get a -1. Now, that's a big thing, because to subdue an enemy territory, you need a 5+ on a 6-sided die roll. So that means the enemy's going to need a 6 to subdue that region. These are the different force markers represented in the game. Here we have my Grand Army, and this is Julie's Grand Army. Julie's represented by red. I will be represented by blue. Here is Julie's Grand Fleet, represented by the marker. This is my Grand Fleet. These represent warships. And this represents a 400-point army at the beginning of the game. That army can be increased in size up to 1,000 points as the game progresses. And those points are basically, you gain them as revenue from the territories that you control and from other sources. These represent the garrison forces that I explained that could be generated by a settlement. And these garrison forces are pinned right on the house there. And they represent a force that will give your enemy a subduing penalty to their roll. So it'll make your territories harder to be subdued by your enemy. Okay, so that's the point of these smaller armies. Now, this one represents a ship. Now, in some campaigns, this one we could say represents a small fleet of merchant vessels. And as it moves from friendly port to another friendly port, it's going to generate 50 gold for you, which is, again, translate into 50 points, which you can use for whatever you want, to build more ships, to replace, units in armies, whatever you want. This can also play the role of a small number of warships that work exactly the same way that the garrison works, except that they will be patrolling a particular maritime region, and it'll simply represent a penalty to your opponent's ability to conquer that region, to take it from you. By the way, guys, it is pouring out there. There's a rainstorm currently in our area. So anything you hear in the background, it's the rain pummeling the studio. Okay, so to begin, Fantastic Battles has a very interesting campaign layout. Turns are called years, and every year is broken up into 4 seasons. 3 of those 4 seasons are going to be your active seasons. This is where you do all your combat, where you move your forces, all that good stuff. And then the final season is a time, really the end phase of the turn. It's pretty much a time where your forces return to their home bases and you prepare for the next year. So the active seasons are spring, summer, and fall. So now that I've said all that, this is my little way of keeping track of years and seasons, I'm going to have something a little more snazzy, a little more interesting. But for now, this is my little way. During play testing, this is my little way of keeping track of years and seasons. So year number 1 is represented by the 1 on the die. And we have spring. We also have summer. We have autumn, all the way up to winter. All right. So it is the first year of the conflict in spring. Now, this is going to assume that we already did diplomacy. We already did whatever we were going to do with recruitment. So it's spring of first year, and I'm going to say that I get to move first. And so I have an option of moving my Grand Fleet right there, or my Grand Army right there. Whichever one I want to move first, doesn't really matter. They're both going to have the chance to move during the movement phase of this spring. So I'm going to choose my Grand Fleet. I want to do some maritime actions, and if possible, I want to convert some of these black pegs into white pegs. They're going to have a little blue dot to symbolize my navy, and Julie's will have a little red dot. I haven't done that yet. But they're going to be on white because they will contrast nicely from the unconquered black pegs. So these are neutral territories at sea. Okay, those black pegs. And it does affect movement. So let's say I want to start pushing this way, west. I want to have a nice shipping lane where my warships can move closer to Julie's territories or maybe engage her in some naval action. So I'm going to aim for this peg over here. There's no inches, no measuring, no nothing. You can move anywhere on the map. The only consideration that you have to take in mind that limits you is how many neutral territories are there between point A and your destination. Okay? Friendly territories like this one, and they encompass a certain, kind of diameter. Friendly territories do not count towards that limitation. You can move through as many friendly territories as you want. Do that. My Grand Fleet leaves port and sails to this peg, and I've crossed only, and it doesn't have to be in a direct line. Basically, this peg is in between all of these travel sites. It doesn't have to be exactly like you don't do a line and say, oh, okay, the friendly peg is not in the way. No, because it's kind of a diameter. That's the maritime territory. So my fleet moves successfully in this one season from my home port to here. Now, if I want to, because I have a friendly territory here, I could actually move down here. Right? Because there's only one neutral territory in the way of this. So I can move from my home port all the way down here. But I think I like this territory. I would like to convert that to my own, because that would form a nice line of friendly maritime territories. I can worry about that later. And the other thing is that we have a limit. We can only conquer 5 of maritime territories each, and the rest remain neutral. Okay, we don't have a lot of black pegs, so that's a good amount of territories that can become yours. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a subdue roll, and this is exactly the same thing that happens in terrestrial forces. So basically, we're using the same rules of the campaign. We're just adding, maybe using things a little bit differently to accommodate the naval portion, but it's really the same mechanic. It's the same rules that the book calls for. So a subdue roll for a neutral territory is always a 3+. Same thing on land. I'm going to roll my dice, and I roll a 2. I am rolling the typical MJ way. Thank you. Great. Wonderful. I do not get to subdue that territory, and my ship cannot leave that area until it actually subdues that territory. because I chose to subdue it. So that kind of sucks. So Julie and I chose, we were discussing what kind of theme we wanted to use for this fantasy campaign. And we chose a sort of Napoleonic kind of age or technology for the fantasy human races that we're using. The human races will be the sort of dominant army, and then they will be supported by a default fantasy race of choice, including the AI fantasy races that we can do diplomacy with. So I chose a sort of French-looking army. There will be muskets, so we'll have like grenadiers, and there will be, it's all black powder technology. There will be simple like rocketry, just like in Napoleonic times, and cannon as well, black powder cannon. So those are the human armies. Then we can choose up to, I haven't decided yet how many points, but up to 150 points or something for the, remember, this is your grand army. We're calling it the grand army. This is your default army. And when you begin the game, it's 400 points. So maybe 150 points would be fantasy of whatever default race we chose at the beginning of the campaign. I'm choosing orcs. Julie is choosing elves. Of course she is. So she has her high elves or whatever. Now, in the miniatures that we are using to represent these armies, I will be purchasing some Pendraken miniatures, 10 millimeter, Napoleonics. Julie has chosen Austrians to represent her fantasy humans. They're not Austrians in the game. And I've chosen French Napoleon troops. I will try to paint them historically, because if I ever want to do a historical game involving Napoleonics, I can. And also magic, because I think what we're going to do is humans are not going to have magic users. It's only the fantasy races that are going to bring magic into the mix. So naval ships will be represented by a handful of scratch builds that I have underway. These will be outlined in Scratch Builder Monthly for probably July. So stay tuned. Any information you want on this campaign, July issue and June issue, which I'm writing now, we'll start mentioning the efforts for this campaign. But we're also using our my old Pirates of the Spanish Main collection of little ships. These are very simple ships that belong to that game, and I have a large collection, so I'm going to use them in the tabletop. That'll represent our navies, and then the handful of scratch build ships will either represent flagships or special steam vessels. We're going to have a little bit of steam technology thrown in here. Most ships will be sailing vessels, but there will be at least one ship that could be a steam gunboat or a steam frigate or even a steam flagship. They're going to be expensive to build and limited, but they will exist. Oh, and don't forget, this is fantasy, so we do have sea creatures. Yes, there shall be sea serpents and kraken, because what's a fantasy naval war game without a kraken? And that's kind of the plan. So my fleet stays there. They're fighting with the mermaids, or who knows what they have to do, but they could not bring this maritime territory to the fold. So that kind of sucks. So now it's Julie's turn, and that's her homeland all the way over there. So now Julie's a very aggressive gal. She has a choice of moving her land forces or a choice of moving her naval fleet. She has a friendly territory right there, so that allows her to move with no problem to this point. And because you can move through one neutral territory, that sends her grand fleet right to my struggling fleet here. And you know what? We're going to say that's exactly what Julie's going to do. So she could move down here if she wanted to conquer more territories for herself. But she's, knowing Julie, she's going to say, okay, this is my friendly territory. This is one neutral territory. So I can move my grand fleet here. And in the spring, late spring of the first year of this war, we now have a naval engagement. We have our little explosion. Okay. Now that's going to represent a game of galleys and galleons with our fleets that we already have made. There will be, I can put up 3 tables here in the studio, so I'll probably have a table for maritime and a table for terrestrial combat. We're not going to resolve that just yet. We're going to continue with the season. At the end of the season, at the end of each season, any combat, either on land or at sea, or both, has to be resolved with a tabletop battle. Filming the campaign, I have a certain strategy that I'm going to apply to film and bring some narrative into everything. Everything's going to come slowly, and really, we're not going to rush the campaign. It's going to take as long as it takes. We're playing 4 years, which isn't extremely long, but it's not short either. It's good because of the way years happen, the way they're split into the 4 seasons. It's going to take a little time, and if it's a particularly busy year, where I suspect maybe towards later in the campaign, when we're really trying to get over each other, there may be a year where we have 2 battles, a naval one and a terrestrial one, or 2 terrestrial ones, or 2 naval ones, or no battles, right? But if it's a particularly busy year, we'll just take our time, do 1 battle at a time. And I have battlefield snapshots, and I have standard battle reports to choose from. Some will be battlefield snapshots, particularly with the map phases, I think. And simply have fun with it. It's again, this is a campaign that's going to last for a while. So we're just going to stretch it, take our time, play through it. And if we have a short map phase, we can start one of the battles right then and there. And if it's a longer map phase, we can, whatever battles are generated, they can take place another time. Okay? Come join us and watch as I conquer all of Julie's territories and finally claim victory over her. All right, I mean, I'm allowed to fantasize, right? So come with us, folks. Join us. I hope that you will join us in this future campaign, probably starting sometime around early July. We were going to start in June, but, things have been very difficult, as you guys can imagine. And there's just no way that we can start in June. And it's better because this way we can actually take our time and prepare and do some practice runs. And Julie's still training in fantastic battles and galleys and galleons. I mean, it's 2 games that we're playing. So it's a good thing not to start in June and just practice. And by the time July comes, we can then get on with the campaign. So now here in the spring, the only thing we have to move are the grand armies, the terrestrial forces. So I'm going to move my grand army, take it out of the capital here, and we're going to march to region 10. Same exact thing that happened at sea, but now it's happening in the land. So I'm going to roll my subdue roll again as a 3 or over, because that's a neutral region. It's up for grabs. And I rolled a 1 in true MJ fashion. So guess what? My grand army is having a rough time with all the beasts and all of the tribes that are inhabiting that region, we're just having a hard time subduing them. So that sucks for me. Well, guess Grand Army is stuck there for now. So now it goes to Julie. Sorry. So she can move here to number 5. That's a neutral region, if we're saying that's her territory. Or she could even move to region 6, because you can pass one neutral territory. You cannot pass territories that have enemies on them. You can try to subdue those territories. That is, you can attack them, and you don't play a tabletop battle. You simply make a roll. These are conquered through rolls. Okay, so there are battles where you just roll the dice to see if you win or not. So, okay, so let's say that's her region. She can go to region 5 or 6. She's going to try to conquer 6. Okay, she can come back to 5 if she wants to. But this has a nice coastal region here. Very strategic, because she can add a port here. And that's going to make it, ships can travel from port to port. So that's going to make a nice area where her ships can go to if they need repairs or if they need to move along the coast. So let's see if she subdues that region. She puts a little red building there to represent the fact that this is her region. Now, in the next the recruiting phase of next year, she can actually spend gold or points to put a port here. And I think that's something that she would want to do, because a port would be very strategic. And you can have both. You can have settlements and ports. So either way. Or during the recruiting phase of next year, she could decide to garrison a small army here. She has to spend 100 points or 100 gold. And basically, there is a small army garrisoning, protecting that region. And it will make it more difficult for me to try to subdue it. So that is all for the movement phase on the map during each of the seasons. Armies will have a chance, and navies will have a chance to move every season up until winter. Winter, everybody returns to their homelands and ports, and that's to prepare for the following year. And that in winter season, we'll probably have narrative. You know, we'll take that chance to make a couple of new lists, maybe add some forces in preparation for the recruitment phase, write them up and whatnot. Whatever, winter is going to kind of represent that end phase, that downtime in the year. We're going to make the victory condition that after 4 years, we tally up all our treasury and our territories, and the one with the most territories will win. It's going to be a very easy winning condition. But future campaigns can be a little more complex. So there's that. All right. So thank you very much, folks. That's the end of this little video tutorial. In the next video, we're going to see diplomacy and the changes that I made to diplomacy so that it'll work either solo or with Julie. We'll talk in the next video.